If you're someone who routinely purchases the Blessing of the Welkin Moon in Genshin Impact, then you are definitely familiar with this lady right here. At the start of every day, the first time you log into the game, she will be right there, waiting patiently for you to stir her magical cauldron with her staff and bless you with 90 Primogems. Yet, despite her being part of our game every single day, we don't know who she is, not even her name. So, for the sake of this video, I will call her Welkin Moon Maiden, or Witch? Whichever one you want, really, because as you will see in a few minutes, the two aren't very different at all. The concept of Witches and Fair Maidens is one that I've been intending to talk about for a long time now, as I believe that it has fascinating implications which would further our understanding of Genshin Impact's cosmology, and it all has to do with foxes and a very special hawk that sits atop the world tree Yggdrasil. How, you may ask? Well, watch and you will see. When you think of witches in the traditional sense, the imagery that comes to mind is that of an old crone living in her isolated hut in the woods, concocting blasphemous potions in her cauldron and making pacts and deals with the devil. Usually, and especially in fairy tales, these witches end up in some kind of struggle with a fair maiden, where the witch often seeks to kill the maiden out of jealousy or greed. As for the maidens themselves, this one isn't as straightforward, because what really constitutes a fair maiden? Well, to put it in simple terms, the opposite of a witch, a figure of kindness and, in a way, abundance, a symbol of divine purity, such as a damsel or a dove. I suppose the easiest and simplest example I can give to get the message across would be that of the Virgin Mary, who is also dubbed as the Mother of God, the vessel through which divinity takes human form. She represents the highest and most noble iteration of such a concept. And now we have a problem. Just a bit earlier, I said that a witch and a fair maiden aren't so much different, which, given the attributes I just highlighted about the two, sounds absolutely preposterous. On one hand, you have this evil crone that is associated with the devil, while on the other, you've got this young, beautiful maiden that represents piety to the divine will. These two things cannot be more different. Except, things are not always what they appear to be, because keep in mind that the gods of Teyvat, the supreme embodiments of holiness, are each and all named after demons, fallen creatures of hell, while dragons, well, the dragon is a commonly used symbol of the devil, of ultimate evil, the enemy of God. Think of the seven-headed dragon from the Book of Revelation for an easy example. So, in that sense, the dragon represents the final and most challenging obstacle on the path of the hero's journey. But the dragons of Genshin are not like that whatsoever. They are the exact opposite of that. Dragons on Teyvat are deities of life, they are angels in Genshin's story, and their king, Nibelung, was the master of the light realm, the heavenly realm. This puts them much closer to the idea of divinity in Orthodox Christianity than the demon gods, and using that logic, the dragons of Genshin follow their depiction in Chinese culture and mythology, where dragons are indeed heavenly rulers of divine order. The point is, whether something is inherently good or evil in Genshin has less to do with its direct source of inspiration and more with how creatures are classified within the game's cosmology. So, when I say that witches and fair maidens aren't too different in Genshin, think of all the clues and evidence that Hoyoverse has given us to support such a claim. And trust me, you won't have to think for too long, because right at the start of the game's story, the traveler meets Signora, a witch who is literally called the Fair Lady. And Rosaline is not just any witch, she is the Crimson Witch of Flames, one of the most infamous in all of Teyvat. But before that, she was a damsel, a fair maiden from Mondstadt who loved to sing and fell in love with the wolf pup knight Rostam. However, given her voice lines in Tenshokaku, Rosaline doesn't seem to appreciate being referred to as a witch, and I find that interesting because it implies that this moniker carries a negative connotation in her mind. Furthermore, given Peruer's voice line about her, the high and refined Rosaline deep down seemed to have always longed for a time when she was a humble young maiden who sang in the city square. As you can see, Signora is a very good example of how Hoyoverse combines witches and fair maidens into a single coherent design. But Rosaline was just the appetizer. Now, let's get to the main dish, because there happens to be a certain Greek deity that mashes our two concepts of interest almost perfectly. I am talking about Hecate, the Greek goddess of night, magic, and most importantly, the moon. The sole daughter of the Titan of Destruction Perseus and the Titan goddess of falling stars and divination Asteria, Hecate was a triple-faced lunar goddess who was granted dominion for siding with Zeus following his victory against the Titans. Hecate was a virgin goddess similar to Artemis and Hestia, and just like the aforementioned two, she was of profound importance to the daily lives of people in ancient Greece. As a goddess of magic, over time, Hecate came to be associated with witchcraft, as the ancient Greeks understood it back then, which is notably different from later depictions from Europe's Middle Ages. Regardless, who's to say that the developers at Hoyoverse don't lean more towards the Greek depictions for their designs of Genshin Impact's witches? In fact, I am almost certain they do. Remember Hecate's mother, Asteria, the Titan goddess of falling stars and divination? I don't think I am blowing anyone's mind here when I say that being the patron of such things, Asteria was heavily associated with astrology in ancient Greece. And her daughter, Hecate, is a goddess of magic, and like I said earlier, more importantly, the moon. Now, since we're on the topic of witches, and you know, Hecate's mother Asteria is the goddess of divination and astrology, I cannot ignore the elephant in the room here, the Hexenzirkel witch, Barbeloth. You see, Barbeloth is a practitioner of astrology, and given her title, Astromancer Trismegistus, she is likely one of the most elite, if not the most elite astrologist in the entire world. To add to that, it is implied during the Archon quest Masquerade of the Guilty that Barbeloth stands on the same playing field as the visionary Vedrfolnir. And Vedrfolnir is the name of a hawk from Norse mythology who sits atop the world tree Yggdrasil and can only be killed using Leviathan, a magical sword crafted by Loki. And this Leviathan will likely play a huge role in the future, as it is brought up in Mr. Nine's book, Flowers for Princess Fischl. All in all, what I am trying to say is that Barbeloth is wise, and considering that she is on par with Vedrfolnir, she is also likely to be exceptionally powerful. So, Barbeloth is the equivalent of Asteria, a patron deity of falling stars and divination, and crucially, the mother of the moon goddess Hecate. But, hold on a second. Barbeloth doesn't have anything to do with the moon, and as far as we know, she isn't the mother of a moon either. Well, actually, no, she is. She adopted one. It's Mona. Okay, listen, let me cook. I promise you, I will elaborate on what I mean when I say Mona is a moon, but before I do, I am going to have to talk about Sunday and Penacony. The story of the world of Penacony in Honkai Star Rail parallels the world of Teyvat to an extremely precise level, where if you look well enough, you will see that most of the fundamental themes and symbolisms in Penacony correspond directly to the ones found in Genshin Impact, with a heavy emphasis on the sun, the moon, music, the struggle to find truth and happiness within a dreamland, and most importantly, angels and eggs. If you are interested, I've already gone over some of the major reoccurring themes between the two stories in this video right here, so in the interest of time and conciseness, I won't rehash them here. Alongside the Trailblazer, the story of Penacony revolves around a guy named Sunday, who is an advocate of the Aeon of Harmony Shippe. And you will quickly notice that Shippe's design is very much analogous to the traditional Greek depictions of Hecate, particularly in their triple-faced nature, where Sunday refers to Shippe as the triple-faced deity. Now, in reality, Sunday is not truly loyal to Shippe. Instead, he is a follower of Enna, the Order, another Aeon whom Shippe assimilated a long time ago. Sunday's ultimate plan was to create a dreamscape where there would be neither weak nor strong, and where everyone could find happiness. To do this, Sunday used the power of Penacony's Grand Theater, which is symbolically considered to be Penacony's moon, to become the chord master of the Harmony song and subdue all people in the world to the tune of the Order's music, where he would become the sun, the only star, and all the dreams of the people would belong to him. So, we already established that the Aeon of Harmony Shippe looks like Hecate, a goddess of magic and the moon, and Sunday used the moon's power to become the shining sun. Interestingly, before fighting him, Sunday spends some time telling the Nameless about the world's creation in 7 days. And let's be honest here, the wordplay is extremely obvious. It's in his name, Sun-day, the sun's day. And Sunday himself even says that in his dream, every day shall be Sunday, while all other days will be removed. But the irony is that once Sunday is defeated, you get the achievement, and then it is Monday. Alright, from here onwards, this video is going to get really crazy, so buckle up. At first glance, this achievement, and then it is Monday, seems like a perfectly straightforward joke. You defeat Sunday, and after Sunday comes Monday. However, when you take into account the high likelihood of Penacony being one giant allegory to Teyvat chapter of Genshin, follow along, you're about to see. Akin to how Sunday means the sun's day in English, the name for Monday means the moon's day. And it comes from the Anglo-Saxon word monandeg, where Mona is the Old English word for the moon. Now, I spent a great portion of this video discussing Witches and Fair Maidens within the context of Genshin Impact, along with how Hecate, the goddess of magic and the moon, and the daughter of the Titan goddess of divination Asteria, represents both the maiden and the witch. I also talked about how the equivalent of Asteria in Genshin is Barbeloth, along with her adopted daughter Mona, whose name means moon. But once again, we have a problem. I could have easily just told you that Mona is the Old English name for the moon and that it comes from Monandeg, which means Monday in Anglo-Saxon. So why the heck did I spend so much time yapping about Sunday and Penacony if they are so redundant? It's because of foxes. Yes, you heard it right. Foxes. To properly understand what I'm trying to say, let me remind you of another seemingly pointless piece of information that I threw at the start of this video. Specifically when I brought up how Genshin subverts the conventional motifs of divinity, where the gods of Teyvat are the demons while the dragons are more akin to the angels. That, of course, is because the dragons of Teyvat are modeled after their counterparts from Chinese culture and mythology, where dragons symbolize royalty and divine authority. But here's the cool thing. It's not just dragons. If you look well enough, you'll start to see that everything in the story of Genshin Impact has some type of Chinese twist to it, in one way or another, and the Hexenzirkel is no exception. You see, foxes are actually a considerably reoccurring animal in the game's story. Just not in your face kind of way. References to them are more elusive, tucked away behind various books and stories which the traveler gathers around Teyvat. And what's peculiar is that these sources often depict foxes as magical creatures. Ignoring the most obvious ones of Yae Miko and the rest of Inazuma's Kitsune, there are two stories with magical foxes that I want to point your attention towards. The first is a book called The Heart's Desire, which talks about a fox-eyed lady who owns a magical antique shop. We know that this fox-eyed shopkeeper is at least over 1,000 years old, because one of her suppliers and customers is Parsifal, a legendary figure from ancient Mondstadt. The second book is The Fox in the Dandelion Sea, written from the point of view of a hunter who meets a magical talking fox who could transform into a tremendously beautiful woman with black hair and eyes reflecting the moonlight. Now, these fox ladies should be based on the Chinese fox spirits, also known as Huli Jing, or more commonly as Huxian, which translates to Fox Immortals. And just like the fox ladies from Teyvat's fairy tales, the Chinese Huxian are traditionally characterized by both shape-shifting and longevity. They can transform into extremely beautiful humans and have prolonged lifespans, gaining more magical power as they age. Although for the most part they are seen as benevolent and charming, the Huli Jing, that is the fox spirits, can also be very sly and use their charm for rather mischievous deeds such as manipulating humans or stealing their life force. On the other hand, the Fox Immortals, Huxian, are fox spirits who achieved a higher level of existence through spiritual cultivation and the amassment of magical power over the ages, at which point they become spirit guardians or even divine emissaries. You know what? Let's make this dish a little more spicy. The Huxian tend to be individualistic in nature, with varying personalities, goals, and motivations, often quarreling and competing with each other for spiritual advancement. Several Chinese tales portray them vying for positions as guardians or facing off for access to mystical resources. Let me ask you, does this remind you of a certain group of magical women? Because I've been literally describing the Witches of the Hexenzirkel. That's right. I believe that the Witches of the Hexenzirkel in Genshin are based on, well, Greek mythology, in tandem with the Fox Immortals of Chinese folklore. They are mages who have reached the height of magical prowess. Also, you know how the Huxian gain more magical power as they age? Notice that Alice is called the Elder of the Hexenzirkel, and Elder can mean leader, similar to how Don Fung was the High Elder of the Vidyadhara. But the word Elder can also be used in reference to age, which by extension would make Alice the oldest of the Hexenzirkel mages, and therefore their strongest. Despite their individualistic nature, the Huxian can also work together to achieve a common goal, and to that end, they will form small communities. You know, like a coven of witches, for example. Additionally, some Huxian are known to take younger disciples to whom they can act as mentors, passing down knowledge and power. This is also something that the Hexenzirkel witches do. Alice has Klee, Rhindaughter has Albedo, and finally we come back to Barbeloth, who has the moon, Mona. Now recall that Barbeloth and her disciple Mona are supposed to respectively correspond to the Greek Asteria, the goddess of falling stars and divination, and her daughter Hecate, the triple-faced goddess of magic and the moon, the witch and the fair maiden. Also, recall that in Sarael, Sunday attempted to become the sun, the chord master of the harmonious choir, and subdue the dreamscape of Penacony under the music of the order using the power of Shippe, who is critically a triple-faced deity, just like Hecate. And Sunday did all of this on the moon. Get ready, cause in case you weren't aware, this is a buy one get one free deal, and I've already prepared an extra dish. There is a book in Genshin called Fables de Fontaine, which is inspired by the stories of the French poet Jean de La Fontaine, who was famous for writing anthropomorphic stories featuring animals that represent humans. The first of 3 fables in the book is called The Maiden and The Sun, and it tells of how the adopted daughter of the fox grew to become the most graceful lady in the land. So her adoptive mother, the fox, asked her to choose a husband, for all would be honored to be the one. So the young maiden then told her mother to wed her to the most powerful being in the world. Thus, the wise fox went to the sun, asking him to take her daughter's hand in marriage. But the sun refused, saying that the clouds are mightier than he, for they can block his radiance. Likewise, the clouds spoke of the mountain, and the mountain spoke of the mouse, and the mouse of the cat, and the cat of the dog, and the dog of the wolf, all the way until the old fox found herself once again facing the glorious sun. And thus did the young beauty marry the sun. The moral of the story at the end states that destiny cannot be changed or evaded, and that one must take responsibility for the duty one must shoulder. Alright, now hold your horses and relax. Mona isn't getting married anytime soon. Remember, this story is heavily metaphorical. But if we are to read in between the lines, given the overarching theme of destiny in this story, along with the fact that the maiden is the adopted daughter of the fox, where again the magical foxes should be the witches of the Hexenzirkel, then the fox and her daughter are Barbeloth and Mona, or more specifically, the moon. And if you take a closer look at Mona, you will notice that there is a very particular lunar symbol on her hat. This one right here, with a star from the inside. And speaking of stars, let's go back to where we left off in Star-Rail, which is where Sunday attempted to usurp the music of Shippe's harmony and control the dream from Penacony's grand theater. There are a few things to point out about this theater. The first is really simple. If you look at it from a Dreamflux reef, it appears like an eye on the moon. This is a clear and obvious reference to the eye that rises from the sea in the dream of the nameless boy from Mamoru Oshii's OVA, The Angel's Egg, which not only forms the narrative foundation for Penacony, but also all of Genshin Impact as well, where it is mentioned in the book Perrin Harry as the Eye of the Crimson Moon. But let's be real, I think most of you already know this, and if you don't, here's a video I made on the Angel's Egg. Moreover, the symbolic moon of Penacony's Grand Theater also functions as a mirror, reflecting the heavens and the earth, where if you are to leave Dreamflux Reef and look at it from the Sweet Dream, you will observe the theater inverted upside down from the other side, with this symbol at the top. A primogem with 2 wings and a crown. That is the symbol of the primordial one as it is described in Before Sun and Moon, and a similar variation of it can be found on the murals of Teyvat's domains. With that being said, if we go back to Dreamflux Reef, you will end up with a different symbol on top. A moon arc with a star in the middle, the exact same symbol on Mona's hat. If you think that this is a coincidence, then think again. Here, come with me. Now look up. You see this? The sky of Dreamflux Reef is the sweet dream of Penacony. The 2 dreams are reflections of one another, with the moon acting as the mirror. And in the description of Peruer's weapon, the Crimson Moon's semblance, it is written that the astrologists of ancient Khaenri'ah saw the origins of the world's fate through the inverted image of the false sky. Both Barbeloth and Mona are astrologists. This is not a coincidence. And if it is true that Mona corresponds to Asteria's daughter Hecate, then we have a very cool conclusion to infer. Mona's name means moon, and she currently resides in Mondstadt, which is German for Moon City. And in addition to being a moon goddess, Hecate was also a goddess of crossroads. The reason I say this is because if you go to Tsurumi Island and translate this mural right here into English, it says, "You are called the powerful Trivia, and you are called the moon by your borrowed light." That is huge, because Trivia means 3 ways, and it is the Roman epithet of Hecate, a triple-faced lunar goddess that over time became a deity of witchcraft in ancient Greece. And when the mural says that she is called the moon by her borrowed light, it might be referring to the fact that the moon is a mirror which reflects the light of the sun. After all, Sunday wanted to use the moon of Penacony, the Grand Theater, to project the light of the sun, the music of the order, onto the entire dreamscape, using the power of the triple-faced Xipe. And the Moon Sisters in Genshin were triple goddesses of music and poetry, who govern fate. And you can kind of see how these 2 concepts are similar, but it feels like something is missing. That's where Hecate comes into play. Hecate is basically the perfect sweet spot right in between Xipe and the Moon Sisters. Just like Xipe, she is triple-faced. And just like the 3 Moon Sisters, she is a goddess of the moon. And when it comes to the aspects of fate and destiny, well, Mona is an astrologist. Her job revolves around deciphering fate. So you've got that covered too. Nonetheless, Mona is not the actual equivalent of Hecate on Teyvat, whoever that ends up being. Mona is akin to Amy. Although they represent certain aspects of a historical figure, they are obviously not that figure themselves. But have no fear, I won't leave you without some type of answer. Remember the crescent moon symbol with the star on Mona's hat? The same symbol that appears on top of the Penacony Grand Theater? To some of us, this symbol is a very familiar sight, because we see it at the start of every day the first time we log into Genshin Impact. It is right behind the Welkin Moon Witch. And if Sunday wanted to turn all other days of the week into his own, while we are always greeted with the one called the Welkin Moon by her borrowed light, then could it possibly be that on Teyvat every day is Monday? But why would a witch want to merge the power of the moon and the sun into one? The answer is actually quite simple, and it has to do with the Fontanian fable of the Maiden and the Sun. In Western alchemy, there is a process known as the chemical marriage, which involves the union of the lunar queen with the solar king as a prerequisite for the production of Rubidu, Red, the philosopher's stone, which grants a myriad of great powers such as transcendental wisdom, immortality, and the ability to manipulate matter. And given what I said earlier about the Huxian, the Fox Immortals of Chinese folklore who seek enlightenment and the amassment of knowledge, the Philosopher's Stone sounds like a considerable object of desire to such creatures. But the witches of the Hexenzirkel aren't necessarily the only ones after the Philosopher's Stone. You see, while looking into Hecate for the purposes of making this video, I stumbled across this artwork by the Italian painter Marco Liberi, which depicts Hecate's mother, Asteria, being pursued by the king of the Olympians, Zeus, who took the form of an eagle and attempted to force himself on her. And this painting made me realize something. When you take into account the fact that Barbeloth shares a number of characteristics with Asteria, then her being mentioned in the same vein as Vedrfolnir starts to become quite suspicious if this piece of artwork has anything to do with that. What I am about to say is purely based on mythology, so take it with a huge grain of salt. During Masquerade of the Guilty, Mona hints that Barbeloth is likely someone who has the ability of a visionary, allowing her to foresee divine prophecies. This aligns with Asteria, who was a goddess of divination. The only other visionary we hear about is Vedrfolnir, the one who in Norse mythology can only be killed using Loki's sword, Leviathan. Now, while it is true that Vedrfolnir is a hawk and not an eagle like what Zeus transformed into, Vedrfolnir does stand between the eyes of a giant unnamed eagle in Norse mythology, and his name, when broken down, can be translated into Vidr, meaning storm, and Folnir, which means the one who sees hidden things. Once again, this is purely based on mythology, but in Genshin, there is only one character who has the ability to see all hidden things, and that, oh boy, happens to be the Sinner. After all, when the Traveler returns to the future, Dainsleif says that it was too late, and that the Sinner has already seen them. The thing is, due to the fact that much of the original myth is lost, we don't know why Zeus went after Asteria aside from his own lust, and it is all up for speculation beyond that. However, one common consensus happens to be that Zeus always desired control, and perhaps subduing Asteria would have granted him some sway over the night sky or prophecies. And it will be very interesting to see if Genshin goes with this. Not necessarily historically accurate, but rather more contextual route with the Greek myth. If you personally ask me, I think that the Sinner is Nibelung. However, Greek mythology tends to be extremely involved in Genshin Impact's cosmology and lore. And what's crazy is that Greek myths have a very high track record of being accurate in Genshin. So I guess we will see. However, we will likely have to wait at least until the end of Natlan to know whether the Sinner is Nibelung or Vedrfolnir. It will probably end up being some random new character we never heard about before. Now, I was going to keep yapping for a few more minutes about Kiana and Paimon, but patch 4.7 is fast approaching and the night is still too short. So I suppose this is a good place to stop. And if you find this sad or annoying, then don't worry. With Imaginarium Theater coming out soon, we are going to be talking about the Hexenzirkel for a long time, I promise you. So, as always, huge thanks to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon, and thank you for watching this video. For now, I've been My Name for Now, and I will see you after I recover from the upcoming lore dump that Dainsleif is gonna throw on my ass.